Welcome to the Gold Report, where we hope to inspire you to be 10% more courageous in your daily life. Please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We have an exciting guest on today's show. We'll be right back.
Our medical industry has been objectively compromised in more ways than one.
We are performing surgeries on these children, and the only people benefiting is the medical industrial complex, because the more surgeries that are done, the more money is made.
Whether you're talking about an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old.
We all know that we can't be getting true informed consent.
You become familiar with the sound a mother makes when you tell her that her child is dead.
What is a doctor.org?
David Mansdoerfer is the owner and managing director of DPM and Associates, public affairs and communications firm. He's co-partner at McMahon's Development, a housing developer in North Texas, and is an adjunct professor in health policy and politics at Pepperdine School of Public Policy. Previously, David spent 4 years at the University of North Texas Health Science Center as a member of the cabinet and chief advisor. From 2017 to August 2019, David served as a senior executive service presidential appointee at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. In addition to overseeing the appointment process for the 270-plus federal advisory boards, David served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health, HHS Chief Labor Negotiator, and Acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Administration. In these roles, he worked on a number of presidential and secretarial initiatives, including ending HIV, fentanyl and opioid, veteran, youth sports, and organizational management. I'm very happy to welcome to the show today, David. Well, welcome to the show, David. It's great to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks so much.
Yes. So this podcast that we do, the Gold Report, the motive, or the tagline, I suppose, is we hope to make you 10% more courageous, meaning the viewer. Because a lot of people over the years have said to me, I'm so brave and I did this and I did that. And I don't want people to think it is up to somebody else, somebody who's a doctor or a lawyer or whatever they are, whatever title they have. You know, we know like Secretary Kennedy, it's not up to just those people. It's also up to everybody in their own life. So we'd love to bring on people who are making a difference in their life and in their world. And hopefully that expands. So that's kind of the feel of the show.
Great.
And so, yeah. And so you were very interesting. You know, you and I met, I guess, a month or a couple months ago. And just if you can introduce yourself to the audience, you know, leading up to, you know, the job that you're doing now in the health space.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of an eclectic background. I feel like I've worked for every level of government, except for maybe a water district. I started out in Orange County, California, working for the County Board of Supervisors, a great gentleman over there named Supervisor John Morlock. We got him elected to the California State Senate, where we actually fought a lot of, if you all remember, SB 1273, which was the when Senator Pan out there tried to remove religious exemptions for vaccines. I was part of Senator Morlock's staff, and he was part of the charge and leading the defense on religious exemptions out there. And then my chief of staff at the time actually he ran President Trump's West Coast campaign in some capacity during the 2016 cycle. So when Trump won in 2016, he got pulled up and brought me with him to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where I served in a number of functions. I served as the director of boards and commissions, which oversees the 280 plus advisory boards that feed scientific and policy ideas into the agency. And then I also served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health, which oversaw a lot of the operational public health aspects of HHS. And some smaller jobs. I was also the chief labor negotiator for the agency and worked on several reorgs when I was there as well, too. So I have a pretty intimate knowledge of inside HHS and how it works and the things that Secretary Kennedy will be facing as he gets on the ground running. And then today, I really just I help folks understand the agency, whether it's, you know, from how you look at, you know, policy impacts within specific disease pathways, or really just like what to expect, when it comes to things that might happen within the inside. So helping a lot of great groups out there, really try and push good policy ideas. One of them is, and I think we met through the Independent Medical Alliance, which is formerly the frontline COVID critical care doctors. That group is rebranded, and so helping them play in the policy space of a number of different topics, whether it's disease prevention, whether it's mRNA, whether it's a whole slew of different topic issues that we're really hoping to that the new administration addresses in the next 4 years.
So that's so interesting. So make sure I don't make a mistake. When I first met you, I thought you were working for the administration, but you're working as a consultant to to people that are putting forward health policy, right?
Yeah, so luckily I'm not inside this time. I like my life in Texas a little too much to go back out. My kids are a little too young this time to go make that lifestyle change again. But yeah, I sit on the outside of HHS, and have helped them on things like transition and other things, but I have no official role within the agency.
Love it. No, both are good. I just wanted to be sure that I was clear. So I'd love your opinion, and the audience would love to hear, because I get asked this all the time about the challenges that Secretary Kennedy faces. I actually know him fairly well. I think very, very well of him. We met I suppose, about 5 years ago now. And I can attest to the fact that not only is he highly intelligent, he's very temperamentally, he's like even tempered, and he is not alarmist. He is widely portrayed as this anti-vax guy, which is not really his perspective. He's interested in informed consent and in solid research. And he also deeply loves America. And he's kind of a classic liberal, in my opinion, a throwback to a classic liberal. But I just think very, very well of him. So, as he's getting his feet wet, about a month ago, when he put out, or less than that, an op-ed on measles and MMR, a lot of people on the MAHA side got pretty alarmed. But I said, whoa, hold on a second. First of all, he has to live in this space and he has to move what he can. But also, if you actually read the article, I loved it, because he actually said vitamin A was really important. He had a lot of truth in that article. So I'm just wondering, as a person who's been on the inside of HHS, how big is the task in front of Kennedy, and what should people in MAHA expect is possible?
Yeah. So let me just give a brief synopsis of what it takes to turn an administration over at one of these cabinet level agencies. So at HHS, they have roughly 180 to 200 political appointees that run the ship of an 80,000 person plus full-time equivalent staff department, with another 150,000 contractors that support the mission of the agency. And so one of the largest infrastructures and the largest by dollar amount government entity, I believe, in the world. It was $1.2 trillion worth of expenditures when I was there. I think that's grown to like 1.6 or 1.8 now. So you have a extremely complex organization where you have divisions, everything ranging from CDC, which is headquartered out in Atlanta, to NIH and FDA, HRSA, which runs the federally qualified health centers, to the disaster preparedness and response office. And so it's a corporate culture. So imagine, you all probably watched what Elon did at Twitter a couple of years ago, where he removed most of the senior staff and changed the course and direction of that entity. Well, imagine that with 10x or 100x times the complexity, with the public health and regulatory issues that you have to deal with, from CMS to FDA to NIH. So right now, what typically happens is you have landing teams that land over at the agency that have between 30 and 40 political appointees, and then they slowly get staffed up over the course of the next few months. So as we all saw yesterday, we saw Dr. McCary and Bhattacharya get confirmed for their positions, but we still don't have a deputy secretary. We still don't have an assistant secretary for health. We don't have a surgeon general. We don't have multiple leadership positions that will take 2 to 3 months probably from this point to even fill. And so you're likely not going to see a fully staffed agency before, I would say, May or June, if we're lucky, of this year. So what I tell folks is that as Secretary Kennedy's getting on the ground and running, give them all a little bit of grace, because again, it is an incredibly complex organization to deal with. And if you don't even have your full staff in place, it makes it even more difficult. And so I've seen some incredible wins come out of the agency. The conversations with the food companies around dyes, I think, is really interesting. And I thought their response around bird flu was actually very heartening, given that the Obama administration, when you saw the $1 billion plan that Secretary Rollins rolled out on bird flu, I guarantee you in the Obama administration, the numbers would have been flipped to money invested in vaccines and therapeutics as opposed to biosecurity, which I would argue is where it needs to be. And so I've seen some excellent work done from the department so far. But I get that, on the outside, it's like, why haven't we done this? Why haven't we done this? Well, we haven't done some of that stuff, and they haven't done it simply because they don't have the staff in place to be able to pull it off yet.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Okay, so when I looked at HHS a couple months ago, it seems to me there was 13 agencies. I may be wrong by one or two, but there's CDC, NIH, CMS, BARDA, I guess, a lot of them. Do you have any opinion? I do, but I wonder if you have any opinion on abolishing or massively changing an agency. If you have any in your mind that you think should be massively changed or even abolished, like, for example, the Department of Education, or if you think that's even possible or desirable.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for large structural reform, and I can kind of go agency by agency, but look at agencies like NIH. There are conversations around like brain science that happen in multiple divisions within NIH. So why are we having conversations around similar disease topics that is bifurcated within different parts of the agency that don't talk to each other? So yes, there's a ton of efficiencies that can be driven out of NIH. CDC, right? The entire public health infrastructure. You even saw it during the Biden administration, where they pretended to reorg CDC and they didn't really do anything of substance. But even they saw the need to publicly have that conversation about the need to restore trust in CDC and the public health infrastructure apparatus that's over there. For other FDA and others, I mean, I think there's a large conversation around user fees and whether or not how that revolves into conflict of interest. I think one of the more natural ones is, we have agencies like the Agency for Healthcare ARC is what it's called. I don't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but they do a lot of data work, but that can be fed into other parts of the agency that I think would make a lot of sense, that it not be a standalone entity. And then SAMHSA and HRSA, I think there's a lot of synergies between those two departments, that to me, there's a lot of opportunity to structure those together. And what I argued when I was there before is that you have an assistant secretary for health that is really like the lead policy doctor of the agency. That position should take a much greater oversight on some of those divisions than it had historically within the last 20 or 30 years. But I think there's an opportunity to really synergize a lot within that office to make sure that there's a lot more efficiency and effectiveness that comes out of HHS.
I can't help myself. So I'm going to just say one very negative thing about the CDC, but then my real question is about the FDA, because I don't want to put anyone else on the spot. I think the CDC is just outgrown its usefulness, and it's very, very harmful. That's just my opinion. When you mentioned something that I don't think most viewers know, which is the user fees, something I'm super interested in. So if you just explain that a little bit, and maybe perhaps finish with, the CDC director nominee, Dr. David Weldon, whose potential nomination got axed because Senator Cassidy wouldn't support it. I believe Senator Cassidy is in line to take a big pharma job when he loses his seat in 26. I think it's like pretty evident that he'll lose his seat and that's where he's going to go, and that he, put that vote in. You don't have to say anything you don't want to say politically. This is my opinion, my observation. But what do you do about a system where, user fees, which you'll explain, and then regulatory capture, on the other side?
Yeah, so user fees are tricky for me because I see good governance within making companies basically pay for approvals of their products as goes through FDA. Essentially, I mean, the very high level, and I profess to not be an expert in this whatsoever, but the very high level is essentially when you're bringing a drug to market or you're bringing a product to market, part of the process is you go through FDA and you essentially pay for the panels that review your drugs and your products. So to me, there's a certain extent of like good governance by making sure that the taxpayer not have to handle that responsibility. But on the other side, then you get into this whole conflict of interest issue: is who sits on those panels, why is stuff being approved, where is it being approved, is there any biases that we don't understand, towards generics or other conversations that the agency traditionally has. So to me, I think it's a really interesting policy conversation where is it truly good governance to have these agencies and these corporations pay for that, or is it a public good? And I think I could see the administration going either direction on it, but definitely given Secretary Kennedy's interest and conflicts of interest, I very much expect that to be cleaned up as part of the process, no matter what direction it goes.
Right, right. You actually made a good argument for it because I understand that the user fees real. I think they only started it maybe in the 90s or something. It's not been forever. So you're right that it could be used correctly or it could be abused. So very, very interesting. Well, we do know that Secretary Kennedy knows a lot about regulatory capture and something he's definitely paying attention to. I think I might have mentioned this to you, but one of the things I think should be looked at, and I don't know if it will be, is what happened to us during COVID. What happened to us doctors and lay people was the world in America was being told that this very safe, cheap generic drug, hydroxychloroquine, first that it wasn't effective for COVID, but then it immediately became it wasn't safe, right? So I had a lot of trouble as a physician even explaining the difference between safety and efficacy. People just heard these negative headlines about hydroxychloroquine, and then they right away just said it wasn't safe, it wasn't safe, it wasn't safe. And then, I mean, it was quite dramatic. And it got me thinking that I don't actually want the FDA in the efficacy business. I don't want them to have an opinion on that. What I mean is, I think the FDA as a government body should certainly have a role in certifying that the products that we see in American stores is safe and isn't terrible for you. I can get behind that. But I am in favor of letting the free market decide what's effective. If a doctor is running around giving drugs that are not effective, that will be discovered by the patients, by malpractice suits, et cetera. But because the FDA has been empowered really in this efficacy lane, I think led to this tremendous maligning and distortion of this drug hydroxychloroquine. And I'm wondering if you have an opinion if the FDA is proper to weigh in on efficacy, or if it should only be safety, or if you think it should stay as both.
Well, I found that topic fascinating because, my wife has lupus, and so she's been on hydroxychloroquine, which is part of the protocol, or she was on it for a number of years. So to hear that it wasn't safe was really interesting to me during that process because she had been on it for such a long period of time. But the FDA is interesting, and let me talk a little bit about the culture of HHS. So, when you have divisions like FDA who really corporately feel like they should be their own entity, and when they do that, and you see this, like if you Google FDA, the former commissioners, I swear every year or two, they always, all the former commissioners write a letter that says FDA should be its own thing and be broken apart from HHS. And so you have an organization that desperately wants to be on its own. and have its own culture and be accountable to only a single set of political appointees, not the kind of, we'd call it the mothership at HHS, which is the Office of the Secretary. So to me, that leads FDA into an interesting culture issue, which is they want to prove that they are a valuable entity in and of itself and away from the rest of the bodies. But when you think about HHS and you think about some of the issues that happened around COVID, right, with testing, we had a big kerfuffle with CDC and the testing, and then FDA, and then if y'all remember right, the tests that went out that had like live virus in them, if I remember right, and how that whole thing put together. But CDC basically created the tests. FDA had to regulate the test, and they both really don't like each other from an inside of HHS perspective. And so it goes back to what Kennedy can do and, you know, what the opportunities are. I think there's a significant opportunity to disrupt the entire public health apparatus by requiring these agencies that have similar topics to start to work together. Because before, like one of the great examples that we had was sickle cell disease. You know, with sickle cell disease, you have therapies that are being driven and researched at NIH. You have the drug approval process, which happens at FDA. And then you have the payment for drugs that could potentially be up to $1 million. They're just going to be very expensive therapies. Well, if you don't have all three of those entities talking to each other during that process, and you know they typically don't like each other when it comes to their corporate cultures, then you're not going to get very far in the public health infrastructure. So to me, some of the lessons that were learned in Trump 1.0 was to how to disrupt these static cultural divides between the sub-agencies inside HHS, force them to work together to actually get better public health outcomes. So I know that doesn't quite answer your conversation on what FDA should be involved in, but at the end of the day, I think it should all be on the table because the significant amount of public trust that was lost during COVID allows this administration to go in and make substantive changes that I don't think we've seen before.
I'll just share with you, and if you have an opinion, I'm kind of curious. You know, my worldview as a physician changed dramatically in 2020 because I saw fraud and it's not, incompetence is not the right word. It was purposeful. It was purposeful corruption, purposeful, not accidental, like in the medical journals that I'm still like, I'm heartbroken. I'm flabbergasted. It's incredible to me that I have very specific examples like JAMA published garbage, Lancet published garbage, New England Journal of Medicine published some garbage stuff. It's not possible to happen by accident. So I think I'm the majority of physicians now. I don't even believe the journals. I really don't read the journals. Sometimes I scan the headlines because I'm curious what the propaganda of the day is, quite frankly. And on a subject that I really know well, I'll read the article and be like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. So I guess I'm just asking you, you know, the average physician, I was an average bedside clinician when COVID started. You know, when you talk about patient trust being lost, I mean, physician trust is lost. I don't look at any journal articles. First of all, they're very heavily skewed towards DEI. It's hard to even read the journal articles without getting hit over the head with racism, it didn't used to be like that in medical journals. So I don't know if you have any comments, you know, how the average physician is supposed to gain trust in the system or.
Well, I think it starts with diversity of viewpoint and diversity of thought. And one of the things that I think is going to start emerging is that we've become such a protocol driven medical establishment where we're so used to if someone presents with X, then you have to do Y. Well, at what point do we let AI essentially take that entire process over? And so to me, if I am a physician, the more I can do to educate myself on opportunities to go outside of your traditional, you know, therapeutic protocols, the more valuable I'm going to be in a new culture. Because as we've seen folks drive towards direct primary care, outcome-based medicine, that's the wave of the future. But why would I need, if I'm just a general consumer of healthcare, why would I need to go see a clinician if all I know is they're going to give me a regurgitation of what Grok or Chat GPT is going to tell me is the protocol? If I have a health issue, I want something personalized, and that's the whole conversation around personal health and population health. AI is going to drive population health protocols. What I want my clinicians to do is focus on me as a person. And so to me, I think physicians need to wake up and medical schools need to wake up, because if all we're doing is training folks to read protocols and working through that way, the whole profession is going to be in for a really big shock when AI inevitably catches up on the protocol game.
Oh my gosh, David, that was very well said. That was very well said. I couldn't agree more. I said we are putting ourselves out of a job. Why would you go to a doctor? You can just go to AI. So the whole trick about going to a doctor is to have a human being listen to you and hear the nuances and get where you are in your life and how to adapt with that situation. So you're exactly right. I'm just going to take a minute and share with you, just because it's so relevant to what you just said. And I don't know if you are aware. So starting about 3 years ago, we started building our own kind of internal alternative to legacy healthcare, and it's Gold Care, and it's national telemedicine, goldcare.com. But we are heavily emphasizing educating people, heavy on that, much less heavy on the physician. We do have physicians, and they are independent, and they're not paid by big pharma. They're just paid by the patient. So the doctor-patient relationship is sacrosanct and it's intact. But we actually spend most of our energy and time in educating people. So we have lectures, like with many, new lectures every week, and we have a library of lectures, and we just work really hard to teach people, because I like you, I can see where it's going. Why would you really need a doctor if all a doctor is doing is regurgitating a protocol? Yeah.
It's true. And you look at a lot of telemedicine right now, where you don't even see a clinician a lot of times. You text in and you give specific examples, or what's interesting is you pick the drug you want, and then it leads you down a leading path of protocols and questions to get you to be able to be diagnosed as what you need.
That's right.
And so to me, that's a that's a really far departure from personalized health and what I would look for in any clinician.
Right. So it's heavily driven by consumerism. A battle that I've lost all my career, but I will always fight, is the antibiotic battle. People have been trained to think they need an antibiotic when they've got a mild viral illness. And when these minute clinics, I guess it's last decade, but minute clinics kind of became a big thing. It was really just a way for Walgreens and CVS to sell their products. I mean, you didn't go into a minute clinic and leave without a prescription. So I don't understand how people think that that's good healthcare. It's not. It's not good healthcare. So we're on the same page. This has been a very interesting conversation. And I just want to thank you for your expertise. I haven't really had a conversation like this on air with somebody as knowledgeable about policy as you are. I don't know if you have
Absolutely.
any final. I mean, you gave us a lot of content, but any final comments on HHS or Secretary Kennedy or the medical
Yeah.
journals, or going forward, trust, vaccine hesitancy, anything?
Well, let me leave with a plea to give Secretary Kennedy and his team a little bit of grace as they get their feet underneath them. I think yesterday we saw, or a couple days ago, we saw Dr. Susan Monterez get announced as the appointment to CDC. Right then a bunch of stuff happened on X, and they were pulling X posts that were from the former CDC director, and it all got confusing and wild. But at the end of the day, I have an incredible amount of trust in the leadership at HHS, both the folks that were there in Trump 1.0 and the incoming Maha team. So my one plea is we have an opportunity to make significant change. Let's give a little bit of grace to the team as they get their feet under their and start running.
That's great. I completely agree. I just want to add, when I heard all that about the CDC director, my first thought, I'm speaking on behalf of viewers, my first thought was that Kennedy was not being listened to on his appointments. And then I learned, as you mentioned, that the way your accounts work on X, the CDC director, the official X profile, I don't know why they do this. They changed the actual name of the person. So the former CDC director, her policies were intact, until January 20th. And after January 20th, it becomes the next or whenever they switched. It wasn't January 20th, I guess. But they go back, and instead of just saying the CDC director, they actually put the name. So she got
Yes.
treated with a lot of content that wasn't hers. I almost fell for it for a little while until I learned that. So I agree with you.
And what I'm hearing is that inside of HHS is thrilled with her, and that includes everyone up to the office of the secretary, who actually also came out and said that she was handpicked. So again, I know it's a world of needing to respond quickly, but show our team some grace as they go through this, because they really are doing some great work there.
Agree completely. David, I want to thank you so much for helping to educate the public, and we will share this widely. Thank you so much for your expertise and time. Thanks for joining me today on The Gold Report, where we inspire you to be 10% more courageous. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.